It only took 3 seconds for my life to go from stable to shattered. 1. The door to the executive conference room slammed open so hard, the walls seemed to flinch. 2 heads swiveled toward the entrance, expressions relaxing into confusion until they saw who it was. 3 Our CEO, Nathan Cross, stormed in with eyes like open flames and pointed directly at me. His voice cracked like a whip as he said something I'll never forget. It's always the quiet ones. That sentence would replay in my head for months. The air changed in an instant. All the faces around the table, faces I'd smiled at in elevators, brought donuts for stayed late to help with reports, turned stiff and suspicious. I felt their stares crawl over me, like ants digging into every inch of skin. My mouth went dry. My palms froze against the edge of the table, and I knew with a sinking, sick certainty that something was horribly wrong. Let me pause here and tell you who I am. My name is Sarah Myers. I'm 35, a senior financial analyst at Argonne Health Technologies, and up until that moment, I'd given the company everything I had. 5 years of late nights, early mornings, uncredited weekends, and not once had I complained. I kept my head down, delivered results, and played by the rules. I wasn't flashy or loud or political. I believed in being dependable, precise, and most of all, invisible. I wish I could say that was enough. Nathan didn't waste time. He stormed to the head of the table and clicked a remote. A spreadsheet appeared on the screen behind him, a sea of cells and numbers, but all I saw was the red figure at the bottom. 1,832,467. That's how much money was missing, he said. That's how much someone in this room had stolen. A chill ran down my spine as silence thickened the air. Everyone looked around. A few eyes darted my way and quickly back. I tried to understand what was happening, what he was accusing us of, but something in his tone told me he'd already made up his mind. This wasn't an inquiry. This was an execution. Then he said my name. Not loudly, not even angrily, just cold and final. Sarah is our finance lead, he said, always quiet, always watching, always approving. It felt like a trap door had opened beneath me. My vision narrowed. I could barely breathe. I opened my mouth to protest, to say there must be some mistake, but the words stuck. My voice felt too small. My heart was racing too fast. I remember looking around the table for some kind of support, a lifeline, but all I saw was distance. Dominic wouldn't meet my eyes. Rachel was already leaning away from me like guilt might be contagious. Nathan went on about protocols, investigations, and audits, but I could barely follow. It felt like my brain had shut down. I wasn't listening to what he was saying so much as how he was saying it with certainty. He wasn't searching for answers. He was assigning blame. And I was it. Then someone muttered, "Check her system," and Nathan nodded like he'd been waiting for it. "Already done," he said. "Plenty to go on?" That's when I knew. This wasn't a discovery. It was a setup. I wish I could tell you I stood up and gave a powerful speech. I didn't. I just sat there, cheeks burning, stomach sinking, fingers trembling under the table. I was watching 5 years of work, of trust, of reputation collapse in real time. It's always the quiet ones, he'd said. And in that moment, for the first time in my life, I wished I had been loud. It still doesn't make sense, not even now. I've gone over it 100 times in my head, trying to find the moment when things started to shift. I keep wondering if I missed something, if I was naive to believe I was ever safe at that table. For the longest time, I actually thought Nathan Cross respected me. He was our CEO, a sharp-dressed, fast-talking leader with a presence that filled every room he entered. When he first pulled me aside and asked if I'd be open to joining the strategic financial team, I thought it was a compliment. He said he needed someone with precision, someone who didn't miss anything. I thought it meant he noticed my work. Looking back now, I wonder if he had other motives all along. At the time, it felt like a promotion. He told me directly that he didn't trust just anyone with the company's most sensitive accounts. I was flattered. After years of grinding through late nights and buried spreadsheets, finally someone had seen me. I wasn't the loudest person in the room, and I didn't play politics, but I got things done. I assumed that meant something. I remember those first few weeks vividly. The transition was smooth. I worked harder than ever, reviewing every client invoice, every vendor ledger. Sometimes I didn't leave the office until long after the janitorial crew arrived. I believed in the mission. We were doing something meaningful, health tech solutions that could save lives, and I was proud to be trusted with the numbers that made it all possible. I should have seen it sooner. Things started to feel off. A few requests came through that didn't sit right with me. Nathan would ask for small adjustments to billing dates or client codes. Just cleanup tasks, he said, smoothing out reporting errors. It was never anything dramatic, and the tone was always casual, friendly. I didn't push back because I didn't want to seem difficult. He had a way of making you feel like questioning him meant you didn't get the bigger picture, and honestly, I didn't want to rock the boat. I'd just been invited into a circle I didn't even know existed. This team operated under NDAs and internal firewalls. Everything was confidential. It felt like I was finally being led into something important. I didn't want to blow it by asking too many questions. Then came the weekend emails. Friday nights, just as I was packing up, he'd forward a last-minute spreadsheet with a short note. Need your eyes on this ASAP. I always stayed. I always checked. I always replied. I told myself I was being a team player, that it would pay off later, that someday when it really mattered, I'd have built enough trust to finally breathe a little. But the trust was a lie, or maybe just one-sided. Despite every report I'd double-checked, every invoice I'd flagged, every error I'd fixed before it became a problem, I was still the one sitting at the end of that conference table with 12 people staring at me like I was a criminal. The betrayal didn't hit all at once. It came in waves. In the realization that Dominic, the team lead, had probably been instructed to monitor my work. In the fact that no one else in that room had even spoken up as I sat there frozen. And in the worst part of all, the quiet certainty that Nathan had planned this. He didn't stumble upon missing money. He framed the entire story to land on me. I know it because of how smooth it all was. The timing, the narrative. The way he listed my qualities was like a checklist. Quiet, trusted, responsible. I had been handpicked not for a promotion, but for a fall. And even then, I wanted to believe it was a mistake. That he'd misunderstood something. Maybe he was under pressure from the board, and I just got caught in the crossfire. But when he said they'd already checked my system, and when Dominic nodded like it had all been taken care of, I finally let the truth sink in. I wasn't a suspect. I was the target. It started small. A discrepancy here, a line item there. At first, I chalked it up to human error, or a system glitch, the kind of thing that happens when software updates push through at the wrong time, or someone fat fingers an account code. But the more I looked, the more I couldn't let it go. The errors weren't random. They had a rhythm to them, a strange consistency that didn't make sense if they were accidental. All clustered within certain departments. All approved under the same clearance level. All just below the threshold that would trigger an automatic review. I didn't say anything right away. That might sound strange, but you have to understand I'd spoken up before. A few years earlier, at a different company, I raised a red flag about budget irregularities in our grants division. My manager at the time smiled, nodded, and told me he'd look into it. A week later, I was reassigned to lower-tier billing and stopped getting invited to meetings. I learned my lesson. The world didn't always reward integrity. Sometimes it punished it. So, this time I decided to document instead. I started simple. Screenshots saved reports and file versions. I created a folder in a personal secure cloud labeled innocuously as tax prep. Every week or so, I'd add a few more entries. Not because I knew anything for certain. Not because I suspected Nathan yet, but because something didn't feel right, and I didn't want to be caught unprepared. There's a very specific kind of tension that comes from carrying knowledge you're not sure you should have, like holding a spark in your palm and pretending it's not there while walking through a room full of paper. I became hyper-aware of my surroundings. The way people paused before forwarding documents. The quick glances between team members were exchanged when Nathan spoke. The vague explanations for billing adjustments that never quite tracked. By the third month on the strategic team, I stopped giving people the benefit of the doubt. I started recording meetings. My state only requires one-party consent, and that was enough. I wasn't trying to trap anyone. I just wanted a record, something solid to lean on if things went sideways. I thought maybe someday I'd use it to write a report, raise a concern the proper way, let the numbers speak for themselves. But the numbers weren't telling a clean story. They were telling a buried one. I'd find files altered in small, meticulous ways, timestamps slightly changed, audit trails deleted or overwritten, transactions rerouted through subaccounts that didn't make sense. All of it masked just enough to escape attention, unless you were already looking. And I was definitely looking. I kept working like normal on the surface, smiled at meetings, shared lunchroom space, showed up early and stayed late like I always had. But underneath my thoughts were spinning. I didn't know whom I could trust. Every interaction felt like it might be a test. Every casual comment from a colleague carried the weight of hidden meaning. Nathan, meanwhile, kept involving me deeper. More access, more sensitive projects. On the outside, it looked like an advancement, but in my gut, it felt like I was being positioned, like someone was slowly building a case, and I was being nudged to the center of it. Still, I didn't confront him. I didn't confront anyone. I just kept collecting. There's a quiet discipline in being methodical under pressure. It takes effort to stay calm when your instincts are screaming, but I knew that acting impulsively would only make me vulnerable. So I sharpened my focus. I double-checked everything I touched. I backed up every interaction, every approval, every call. By the 6th month, the pattern was undeniable, but I still didn't fully see what it meant. I assumed someone else, someone higher up, was orchestrating something shady, and that maybe Nathan just wasn't aware. Or maybe he was being manipulated too. I didn't want to believe the worst of the person who had once praised me as a cornerstone of the department. But deep down, I was starting to suspect otherwise. I kept thinking about the timing, how quickly I'd been moved into the new role, how suddenly the trust had been extended, and how carefully the irregularities were tied to accounts under my purview, but never quite initiated by me. It didn't feel like a coincidence. It felt like grooming. Or worse, it felt like preparation. So, I prepared too. Quietly, thoroughly, relentlessly. Because something told me a storm was coming. And when it did, I would need more than instinct. I would need evidence. I remember the moment I stopped being afraid. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was quiet, almost still, like the calm just before a storm hits. I looked around that conference room at the faces that had turned against me, and something inside me clicked into place. I'd spent months preparing for this without even knowing it. My hands stopped shaking as I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. Nathan's words were still echoing through the room. His voice was smug, confident, and cruel. He was sure I'd break. He was sure he'd won. He had no idea what was coming. I tapped the screen and opened the secure folder I'd been maintaining. 10 months of files, screenshots, audit trails, voice recordings, transaction logs. I turned the screen toward him and waited. I didn't need to say anything yet. The evidence spoke louder than I ever could. His face changed almost immediately. First confusion, then disbelief, then something colder, something closer to fear. He took the phone from my hand, but I could tell by the way his fingers tightened that he already understood what he was about to see, and he was right to be afraid. I had everything. The original reports before they were altered, the email requests always vague but always directed at me, the recordings of our one-on-one meetings where he'd asked me to adjust invoice codes or reroute payments to subaccounts, always with a reason, always with a smile, always just ambiguous enough to keep me guessing. But I hadn't guessed. I had documented. The room went silent. No one moved. Even Dominic looked stunned, mouth slightly open, like the reality of what was happening hadn't fully caught up to him yet. I took a breath, not to calm myself, but to steady the truth I was about to release. "This isn't a mistake," I said. "You targeted me. You knew what you were doing. You used my diligence as your cover. And when the discrepancies became too obvious to ignore, you decided to make me the fall guy. But I don't fall easily." Nathan tried to cut me off, said something about confidentiality, about violating policy. I barely heard him. My voice was louder now, stronger. I said every document had already been backed up in multiple locations, including one sent to legal counsel, including one stored offline, including one ready to forward to federal investigators. I'd come prepared, and he was out of moves. Someone to my left let out a soft breath. Maybe Rachel, maybe Amari. It didn't matter. What mattered was that the tide had turned, and Nathan knew it. His eyes darted to the door, to his assistant, to the security camera in the corner. Every exit was closed, every angle covered. I watched him unravel. It wasn't fast, it wasn't dramatic. It was slow, like watching a wall crumble one crack at a time. He tried to call for a private conversation, tried to regain control of the narrative. But it was gone. I had taken it back. I said no. I said the conversation was over. I said if he wanted to speak with me again, he could do so through legal channels. I don't know what surprised him more, that I had the evidence or that I finally used my voice. It felt like a lifetime had passed in that room. But really, it had only been minutes. Security came. Not for me, but for him. I sat at the same table where I'd once felt invisible and watched the man who tried to destroy me walk out with nothing but panic in his eyes. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt stillness. Not peace, not joy. Just a deep, quiet knowing that I'd survived. Later that day, people started whispering. Some sent messages, some apologized, some kept their distance, but I didn't need any of that. What I needed, I already had proof. Clarity, a voice I hadn't used in years, and the unshakable knowledge that I was no one's scapegoat. Not then, not ever again. As security led Nathan out of the building, he paused just long enough to look back at me. His eyes locked on mine with something colder than anger. He leaned close and spoke low enough that no one else could hear. "You'll regret this. No one hires a whistleblower." Then he was gone. I didn't respond. I didn't flinch. But my body didn't believe my silence. Hours later, I still felt his words clinging to my skin like smoke. I kept replaying them as I sat alone in the break room long after everyone else had cleared out. They were meant as a threat, and they worked. The high of exposing him evaporated quickly. In its place came a quiet, gnawing fear. What if he was right? What if I'd just destroyed everything I'd worked for? I didn't have a new job lined up. I didn't even know if I'd be allowed back in the building the next day. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling of my apartment, listening to the sounds of a city that felt too loud, too fast, too much. Every passing car made me flinch. Every message alert made my stomach turn. I'd done the right thing, but it didn't feel like a win. It felt like exile. I didn't hear from anyone at work the next day, or the day after. No updates, no emails, no confirmation of what would happen next. I avoided the news. I ignored LinkedIn. I couldn't stomach seeing people move on while I sat still, paralyzed by uncertainty. On the third day, my phone rang. It was Amari from the finance team. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't say anything gently. She just said, "The board's calling emergency meetings. People are stepping down. They want someone to help restructure. Someone they can trust." I didn't say anything at first. The idea of going back felt impossible. Like volunteering to walk into a burning building with a hose made of thread. But Amari wasn't finished. "They asked about you by name," she said. "They want to talk. No promises, but they're listening now." The silence on the line felt heavy, like she was giving me room to make a choice I didn't know how to make. I closed my eyes and tried to imagine what it would feel like to walk back through those doors. The same doors Nathan had slammed open. The same halls that had once felt safe, then felt hostile, and now something else. I didn't feel brave. I felt exhausted, but I also felt something else. A flicker of control. A sense that maybe for once I could shape what happened next. I told her I'd think about it. After we hung up, I sat there, phone still in hand, trying to breathe. There was no victory music, no celebration, just the quiet aftermath of having survived something ugly. That's the part no one talks about. The in-between. The moment after the monster is gone, but before the rebuilding begins. I wasn't ready to move forward, but maybe I didn't need to be. Maybe all I needed was to stop standing still. So I opened my laptop, stared at the blinking cursor on a blank page, and started writing a list. Not of goal, not of revenge. Just names. People I trusted. People who'd stood by me. People I might want beside me if I chose to return. It was a small act, but in that moment, it felt like power. I walked into the boardroom expecting rehearsed apologies and polished reassurances. What I didn't expect was the silence. 7 people who'd once overlooked me now sat watching every move I made like I was the key to something they couldn't control. That silence, for once, didn't intimidate me. It empowered me. Diane Mercer, the board chair, thanked me for my courage. Her words were scripted smooth and likely reviewed by legal and PR. She said my actions had protected the company from far worse outcomes. I nodded, but said nothing. Letting them talk was part of the plan. People in power tend to reveal more when you give them the room to fill. Lawrence, the company's lead counsel, explained that the fraud went deeper than expected. 18 months of doctored records, 7 executives implicated, and millions still unaccounted for. 4 had resigned. 3 were contesting termination. He spoke as if reading from a damage report, detached and clinical, as though this was just business. Then came the ask. They wanted me back, not just as a returning employee, but as the head of a newly formed compliance division. A director-level position reporting directly to the board. Authority, autonomy. And of course, the unspoken request is to help restore public faith in the company. For a second, I almost said yes. Almost. Instead, I leaned forward and told them I had conditions. First, I said my entire team gets cleared publicly, not in whispers, not in closed-door meetings, a company-wide statement acknowledging their innocence and the hell they were put through, plus compensation for the stress, the suspicion, the damage done to their reputations. Diane blinked, then nodded. Reasonable, she said. Lawrence scribbled in his notebook. Second, I want to personally interview everyone remaining in finance. No inherited teams, no holdovers from the previous structure. I need to trust every person who reports to me. No exceptions. More nods, some cautious, some surprised. Then I gave them the one that made the room still. I want Nathan's office. The air shifted. Lawrence looked up. Martin from HR cleared his throat. That's not standard for a director-level position. I looked him in the eye and didn't blink. Nothing about this situation is standard. Diane studied me for a beat, then said quietly, Anything else? I took a breath. Yes, no NDA. I won't disparage the company, not if you act in good faith. But I will not sign away my right to speak, ever again. The room dropped 10 degrees. Lawrence hesitated. That's highly unusual. I cut him off. So is being publicly accused of embezzlement by your CEO. I didn't ask for any of this. But I won't walk back into this building unless I know I'm walking into something better, not just something different. They dismissed the rest of the room. Just Diane, Lawrence, and I remained. We negotiated for 45 minutes. Every condition was written down, clarified, and confirmed. When I walked out of that room, I had everything I asked for. And something even more valuable. They respected me now. The next morning, I walked into Nathan's old office with my head high. The same office where he'd once plotted my downfall was now mine to command. The desk, the view, the title, none of it meant as much to me as what it symbolized. I wasn't there to take his place. I was there to dismantle the system that let him rise. Lucia came in an hour later with a small plant. Office warming gift, she said, placing it on the desk. Hard to kill. Like your career, apparently. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like justice, quiet and earned. The power shift wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The message was clear. I hadn't just survived. I'd returned. On my terms. With conditions. And with a memory sharp enough to ensure I never had to ask permission to speak again. Rebuilding wasn't glamorous. It wasn't fast. It was long days, longer nights, and the kind of work that left your body sore and your mind heavy. But I wasn't doing it alone. I met with every member of the former team, one by one. Not just to evaluate, but to listen. Some were angry, some were still shaken. But most wanted the same thing I did, a way forward that didn't pretend the past hadn't happened. I brought Amari in to handle communications. She understood the language of clarity and accountability better than most. Terrence, the quiet genius from IT, came on board to build security systems we could trust. Even Dominic returned humbled but ready to work. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He earned it with every hour he put in. Only Rachel declined. She said the place felt tainted now. I understood. Not everyone wants to rebuild what nearly destroyed them. Some want to walk away and never look back. That, too, takes courage. As the new department took shape, so did the culture. We ran audits, cleaned records, set new standards. There were days when it felt like too much, like the shadows Nathan left behind were still hiding in the corners. But every policy we rewrote, every system we fortified, was a small victory. 3 months in, I got a text. Unknown number. You think you've won. Enjoy it while it lasts. I didn't need to guess who it was from. My hands trembled anyway. I showed the message to Lawrence. He didn't flinch. Nathan's under investigation by multiple agencies, he said. If he keeps contacting you, it only hurts his case. Still, that night I barely slept. The next morning, I opened my phone to a news alert. Former CEO of Argonne Health arrested on federal fraud charges. The photo didn't show the man who'd once towered over conference rooms and silenced objections. It showed someone smaller, weary, caught. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt weight. Because the fight wasn't over. I'd be asked to testify. Lawrence helped prepare me for court. He said to tell the truth. That was all I needed. But walking into that courtroom felt like stepping into fire. My suit was armor. My documentation was a shield. And still my heart pounded so loud, it felt like the only sound in the room. Nathan didn't look at me at first. When he finally did, it was brief, sharp, venomous. I stared straight ahead. I had nothing left to prove to him. On the stand, I told the story again. The transactions, the emails, the patterns. I explained how I'd documented everything because no one had listened when I tried the easy way. I spoke clearly, slowly, without apology. His lawyer tried to twist it, tried to say I had motives, that my promotion discredited my integrity, that I only spoke out because I wanted more. I didn't flinch. I said I would have gladly stayed invisible if it meant not being falsely accused, but I wasn't given that choice. I just chose not to disappear. Outside, reporters waited. I kept walking. This wasn't about headlines. It was about survival. 6 months later, Nathan pleaded guilty. 8 years in federal prison. The charges were made public. His schemes stretched across 3 companies. He'd been preparing to run when everything collapsed. He never got the chance. Meanwhile, my department became a symbol. Internally, they started calling our new protocols the Myers Framework. Clients asked for them. Other companies asked to learn from us. I never asked for any of that, but I welcomed it. A year to the day after Nathan first accused me, I called my team into the same room where it all began. This time, I stood at the head of the table. I thanked them for staying, for rebuilding, for believing in something better. Lucia looked at me and said, "You showed us what leadership really means." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. That night, I stayed late in the office. The light was soft, the halls quiet. I sat at the desk that once belonged to a man who tried to silence me and thought about how much had changed. I never wanted to be in charge. I never wanted attention. I just wanted to be respected. I just wanted fairness. I just wanted to be heard. 2 years after the day everything fell apart, I was promoted again. This time, to the CFO. The morning the announcement went out, I received an envelope. No return address. Inside was a clipped article about my promotion. On the back, one line written in familiar sharp handwriting. "Congratulations. You won." I didn't reply. Some victories don't need acknowledgement. Power didn't change me. Survival did. And maybe that's what I want others to understand. Being quiet doesn't mean being weak. Watching closely isn't the same as being passive. Sometimes it's the ones you overlook who hold the most strength. So, if you're like me, if you've ever been afraid to speak, afraid to stand out, afraid to push back, know this. Your caution isn't paranoia. Your instincts aren't flaws. Your silence isn't a flaw. It's a choice. And when the time comes, you'll know when to break it. Not every story ends with justice. Not every survivor gets a promotion. But sometimes just finding your voice is enough. And sometimes it changes everything.